Hi, welcome back to the Pole Shift News. First of all, very big thanks to those few, and it is always a few, that support the channel, and more importantly, the ones that supported it over the last week. Kudos to you. I think you know why you do it. I think we are like-minded, and we realise that this does have serious implications for some people less fortunate than ourselves over here in the West, and other parts of these worlds where people are less fortunate than ourselves. So very big thanks to you guys. Thank you for the support that you give the channel and the website, and we do our best to put the information out, and hopefully those people that are questioning what's going on right now can come along and get an idea as to what is more likely the case as to what is going on. In the last video we covered solar cycles, and it was in the studying of that data in the last video that we found some discrepancies, and most likely purposely done, because through looking at where the sunspots are actually positioned, it also gives us another indication as to where we are in the solar cycle, as opposed to just knowing that we have an 11-year cycle. If we concentrate on the sunspots and where they're positioned, we'll know whereabouts the sun is in its cycle, instead of just taking for granted that it will go through its solar cycle on average every 11 to 12 years. What we find when we look at the sunspots at the present time is that they're equatorial. Not only this, that they are diminishing, means we're getting days without sunspots, and this is becoming more frequent in the later days of where we are right now. So we are clearly heading towards a minimum. Whether that will end up being a grand minimum is another thing, but if we look at the last 3 solar cycles that goes back to 1985, we can clearly see that these are rapidly declining. And we had a similar situation back in the 1700s in that we had or experienced the Dalton minimum, and before that was the Maunder minimum. And I've discussed this before, and I've presented the data as well, which totally goes against what's coming from these organisations that are saying that global warming is responsible for the increase in CO2 in the atmosphere. And they go back into the records, and they analyse the CO2 levels from the Dalton minimum, or around about that time. But if you go back to the 1760s, when we really got the Industrial Revolution on its way, you'll find that prior to this there was dips in temperature, and those dips in temperature correlated to lower temperatures at the time, as well as low sunspots. It really shouldn't come as a surprise to people that the sun is the main climate driver and not the gases in our atmosphere. There are concerns which I have about the gases in the atmosphere. I mean, this, if you like, is a sealed biosphere, the Earth, and we can only put a certain amount of a particular type of gas into the atmosphere. And if we are putting CO2 into the atmosphere at an alarming rate, I don't believe that we are, then we're going to be pushing other gases that are naturally in the atmosphere out. Now, for those that are familiar, many millions of years ago, the Earth only consisted of an atmosphere of CO2, and it was slowly scrubbed out of the atmosphere by mainly bacterial life forms in the sea. So we've got natural cleaners of the atmosphere, and not only that, most organic life form on the planet is a receiver of CO2, in that it naturally stores it in its carbon structure, and as a result of that, it can only thrive, in my view, if there's more abundance of the material which it needs in the atmosphere. And that can't be a bad thing, because it should give us back, through photosynthesis, oxygen. So it's quite clear to me what's going on. There is a cover-up, And I can only speculate as to why that is the case. It could be for many reasons. I mean, if we just look at what happened in Germany over the last week or so, when they announced that there could be possibly another Cold War scenario. And as a result of that, they asked people to stock up at least 10 days worth of food and water. Well, the result of this is that in some of the shops, people had wiped it out completely bare in panic. And you can just imagine, if we are facing possibly a Maunder minimum period, what sort of implications that could have for these developed countries around the world, especially those developed countries that have many souls within those continents or on them continents within them countries. For instance, America, 300 million people, so on and so forth. I'm not going to mention all the amounts of people in the countries. You can just imagine yourselves. And then just think of what the implications of another Maunder minimum would be. Some people think, if we had solar flares that destroyed the electrical infrastructure, such as what happened in the Carrington event, that would be, the end of our functioning system over here, because we're so heavily reliant on technology to, do pretty much anything these days. It's true. It would have massive implications. One of the biggest implications would be we just couldn't put the infrastructure back in place after it being devastated in a short burst of time. But equally, another Maunder minimum in this day and age will have the same effect. Some of you that live in some of the parts of the United States and Canada witness regularly what happens when you have severe winters and how the ice builds up on the power cables and, destroys them. It's the same sort of thing. Not only this, if we get prolonged cooler periods, it will have a knock-on effect on the crops. And I believe that this is the main reason why they are not being very truthful and forthcoming with the data as to what is going on. Now, we're only talking about one subject here. We're talking about the solar cycles and how they affect climate and how climate affects people. We haven't yet discussed, and I think we should do, the implications of the magnetic pole reversal. Because if you think this is a big deal, the solar cycles and the implications that we could possibly face through that, and we are facing them at this present time, then I kid you not, you can amplify that 1,000-fold, no problems. And that's, the situation we're facing with the possible scenario with the, well, it's not possible, it is a scenario that we're facing with the magnetic pole shift. When this actually gets underway and we leave those strong magnetic field lines and go into the weaker magnetic field lines, it's a point of change. And it changes everything. It changes the magnetosphere, which is our protective shield against harmful cosmic rays. That in effect changes our biodiversity, puts it more at risk for cancer and things like that. But not only that, we'll be going through this during a time where we could possibly be in another prolonged winter. So crops are going to be devastated. We're going to take a double slap, if you like, off nature, and it's going to happen. The facts are before us. What we need to do with the evidence that we've got is just our best. Keep our eyes on whatever we can with regards to whatever equipment we can put together in an effort to monitor what's going on. And the only other thing we can do is inform people. I just want to briefly mention, this week I was watching a documentary about Indian farmers, and I've mentioned this time and time before, and I just want to reiterate the fact this is having a devastating effect on human beings, regardless of their ethnicity, religion, or whatever. You put yourself in their shoes. Your ancestors have passed down lands throughout generations, and you're the benefactor of those, and it is your ambition to do the same as what they have done, in that you pass it down to your children. And as a direct result of climate change, and drought in India, they are suffering massive crop failures, unprecedented, crop failures, and they're also using genetically modified seeds in order to get them through a guaranteed period of a crop. And the problem is, when you select a crop that's better suited for a more droughted area, and all of a sudden you get flash floods, well, it just kills the crop. As a result, these farmers throw themselves into rivers, killing themselves, and take their lives in other many forms of way. And it's nothing short of a catastrophe. I say, if we just put our differences aside for one moment, these are human beings. They're the same as us, and we're all on this planet together. And it could well be us, and it not be just affecting them. It's a subject close to my heart. We're talking hundreds of thousands of farmers, not just from India, but from in these other eastern countries that are severely affected by these climate changes, and they're puzzled as to what's going on. And really what we need to be telling them is what best information that we've got to hand, and that is stick with the natural crops, the natural seeds, because these are the ones that have lasted the test of time. They have slowly evolved to the changing climates and whatever climate can throw at it, so they are more hearty crops. They don't produce the massive yields as some of these glorified GMOs would do in the ideal situations that they're supposed to grow in, but they do deliver at the end of their season, and a bit is better than worth. A bit is more worth an unguaranteed lot, if you get what I mean. I could probably have put that better, but I'm sure you get where I'm going with this. The other problem that they're facing is the drought itself and the lack of water. And this is not being made any easier because, the farmers in these countries are rerouting the rivers. And as a result of that, your poorer farmers aren't getting a look in. It's crazy, isn't it? I believe there is water in these regions. It's just not being got at. I have heard some situations where people have made the desperate attempt to dig wells, 80, 100 metres deep, single-handedly, and struck water. Now, if you could just imagine if the infrastructure over there was more geared up to, boreholing and things like that, there'd be more water holes. People wouldn't be having to walk, 10 to 15 miles with water canisters, and they wouldn't be, just rationed with small amounts of water, These are things that we've got sitting idle in yards, and compounds over in this country, this equipment, and yet it could be put to better use than just rusting there, by being used in a country where it could be delivering the most life-sustaining substance on this planet, water, fresh water to drink. With that and other desalinization technologies where we reverse for osmosis water from the oceans and produce clean drinking water, I'm sure we could resolve some of the problems these third world countries have if we were working together. I mean, who's going to come to our assistance in these first world countries that we're in right now? I mean, why should they help us in a time of crisis if we couldn't help them at the time of their crisis? It's a case of you scratch my back, brother, and I'll scratch yours. If you ask me, in an ideal world, that's the way it would work. But the reason, as I say, I believe they're not coming forth with the information and being clean with the data is because there is, large corporations that would be devastated if they did. So this is, a paradox which is caused through the want to earn money. And that's a sad deal, isn't it, really? When it always comes down to money, that stops things, happening. It shouldn't be the way. We've got the resources on the planet, we're just not utilising them. We're not managing the planet very well, and things need to change. These people that are running things, and we know, don't we, that corporations have a big impact in political issues, which relate to resources being distributed. We need to, press on these people a little bit more so that they find somehow they're conscious and not act in a manner which is more accustomed to greed and money, but more accustomed to humanity. But when you just switch on the news, a lot of the time it's just proper propaganda, isn't it? And you sort of like get a helpless feeling that things are never going to change until something very seriously happens, and it's avoidable. That's the thing. That's why scientists do this work. It's that we're able to predict it. There's no other reason why you'd want to study something if you didn't want to know, first of all, how to predict something. It's part of the experimentation process. You observe something and you try and recreate that experiment so that the same effects are, found. Well, guys, I don't want to carry on too much. What I do want to do is, in the same context over the last two videos, this one and the last one, brought it to your attention on how serious the climate change is with regards to solar cycles. What I'd like to get back to is the magnetic pole shift and the serious implications, the far more serious implications that has, and the effects that are taking place with regards to them right now. So, I want to again thank those people that regularly support the channel. For those that don't, you've got a clear idea now of what we're about. I couldn't put it any more clear in the last two videos what we're trying to do on this channel. Consider supporting it. For some, it's a lifeline. It really is. And I'm not going to go on too much about that either. I'll just say the link's down there, as it always is, guys. I'll be back within the next week or thereabouts, and until then, guys, you have an enjoyable time, or as best as you can, and try not to worry about it too much. And as always, I'll say what I usually do. Bye for now.